Okay, so in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to grid your image and transfer it to the paper for our portrait study. Now when we do this, there are two ways of doing it. One is the hard copy method, where you actually take a picture that you're going to use. You're going to grid it itself. You're going to use that picture to transfer. Or the more modern digital method, where you grid your image on something like Photoshop. So I'm going to go through both of them one at a time so you can understand. You can decide how you want to proceed in terms of your own particular image. So here's a picture of the artist Frida Kahlo, and let's say you printed it off on your computer or you took it out of a magazine. So it's going to be small. Maybe it's going to be 4 inches by 8 inches or 6 by 6. I don't know. So here's a small image. Our pad, symbolized by the white rectangle on the right, is 18 inches by 24 inches. Okay, so it's quite a bit bigger. And so the gridding technique allows us to put lines on the image and lines on our paper and then transfer box to box. But there is one important consideration we have to take into account before we begin to do this, and that is the shape of the images. If you look at the picture, the original picture is relatively square. All right. Our paper is rectangular because it's 24 inches tall by 18 inches wide. So if we were to just go ahead and transfer that, let's say we divided this into, equal sections. So I didn't go over that. What we're going to do is we're going to divide our image in half, and then each half is going to be divided again. So you'll see that here. But if we just take our square image and transfer it to our rectangular picture, you can see what happens. The image completely distorts. So what we have to do is we have to make our paper fit our picture rather than the other way around, because I want you to select your picture based on what you want. So cut it down, and we're going to cut out the backgrounds, we're going to cut out the bodies and the clothing. We're going to concentrate just on the face. And so I want you to get a picture that you like in terms of composition. Don't worry about this. I'm going to show you how we trim our paper. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is select our picture, and then we're going to grid it. Like I said, we're going to grid it down the middle vertically, and then the two sides are each going to be gridded vertically, and then we're going to grid it down the middle horizontally, and then the top and the bottom are also going to be split in half. So we'll end up with 16 sections in our picture. Now, to do this, you don't need a ruler. Just take your picture and fold it. If you fold it in half, you're going to get your crease down the middle. And then if you fold the end of your picture to the middle, going this way, you will get this line. Likewise, when you fold this to the middle, you'll get this. And then you just do the same in the opposite direction. And then what I want you to do is take a pen and actually draw these lines on there. So when you fold your picture, you'll get kind of white crease marks. We really need to be able to see the shapes so that we can compare the shapes of the face to the shapes of the grid. So by putting them in dark, our brain can really kind of make sense of what's happening inside those boxes. All right, so we're going to do that first. And then you're going to take your picture and you're going to move it over, and you're going to place it in the bottom corner of your pad. So line up the bottom corner of the picture with the bottom corner of the pad. And then you're going to draw a diagonal line from your picture, from the bottom corner of the picture to the upper corner of the picture, and you're going to continue with that line all the way off till you get to the end of your paper. So you might need a long piece of wood, or if you have a long ruler, anything lying around the house, to be able to do that. What this line represents is the ratio between the side and the other side. Okay, so that angle depends on how tall this is compared to how wide this is. And so where it goes off the paper right here, that's going to be our upper corner. So if I cut the top off, just put a line across the top and remove this square right here is exactly the same proportion as this square, just a little bit bigger. In fact, anywhere on this line that I stop and make my corner is going to be proportional to this. All right, so run your line to the end. You're going to make your mark, and then you're going to make a horizontal line. And all of this is paper we don't need. However, keep it in your pad. Don't cut your picture out. Just leave it there. You can use this as a free space to clean your eraser and test your pencils and charcoals. And then when you're done, you can cut it out. But right now, just leave that space in there. All right, so the next thing we're going to do, we remove our picture. We don't need it now. We have a diagonal line running through the paper, is create a diagonal on the other side. All right, so that identifies the middle of our paper. It also allows us to do some other interesting tricks. Okay, so now we have to grid this. We know this is 18 inches, so that's pretty straightforward. We just divide it in half and half again. But this is going to be a really weird number. So there's a way around this. We'll just ignore this for now. So let's look at the bottom. Because it's 18 inches, we know that the middle is going to be 9. So if you mark off 9 inches here and 9 inches there from either side, and then connect the dots, it should go through the middle. So you should have something like this. And then if you take each of these sides, they're 9 inches, then at 4.5-inch intervals, you're going to get 2 more lines. So you mark it off at the bottom, you mark it off at the top, and then you connect the dots. All right, so your paper should begin to look something like this. Do these lines fairly light because we are going to erase them, so don't make them really heavy lines. And then in these little intersections where the vertical lines intersect the diagonals, I want you to connect those intersections horizontally to each other so you get something like this. All right. So what that's done is it's given us our quarter mark. So where this diagonal intersects this vertical is where our first quarter line is. And then all you have to do is plop in the middle there. All right. Now it's hard to do the middle. Be careful because sometimes this side is higher than this side. So you might want to just measure down and make sure all of these things are equal and all of them are equal going this way. They're not going to be the same number. They're going to be different depending on the proportion of your original image. But just, bring that down and make sure each one of these squares is the same height and the same width. And if not, there's a mistake. So, work backwards and try and figure it out. Another way you can do this without doing the diagonals and stuff is literally to take a piece of paper, cut it to the length of the side that we're working on, fold it in half, and you're going to get a mark. Put the piece of paper next to your pad and make a mark there. Fold the top to the halfway mark, and you're going to get another division. Fold the bottom to the halfway and another mark. Put it next to your paper, make these 3 dots, put this onto the other side, make these 3 dots, and connect those lines. So you can either do the kind of shorthand, cheap and cheerful way, or you can go via the measuring and the lines and the rulers. All right, so that's going to give us a gridded piece of paper ready to go. The other method that you can use is to do this entire thing digitally on your picture, and then just grid your paper 18 by 24. So in other words, we're going to start with the paper. So for instance, you'll start with maybe your original image. So don't cut it down, don't trim it, just start with what you have originally. We know that our paper is 18 by 24. So that has a certain ratio. So what we want to do is cut this to the same ratio as that and then grid it. And we can do all of that in Photoshop. All right, so here's how you would do it. And if you don't have Photoshop, there is a free version called GIMP, G-I-M-P, which you can download from the internet. Or maybe you have some other photo editing software that will allow you to do this. So what you do is you take your original image and drag it into Photoshop. And then we're going to use this tool right here, which is going to give us a rectangle, which we can then crop out from the original picture. But the trick is we want this rectangle to be proportionate. So here's how we do it. You select the rectangle, you go up here to the style and you choose fixed ratio, and then you put in our paper margins, 18 by 24. Then when you drag your cropping frame, it will automatically be the shape of our paper. And you can make it smaller, you can make it bigger, and then once you have it, you can actually grab it and reposition it. So you can see the window of what you want from the photograph. All right, so that'll give you a cropped image that is perfect, and then you go to crop, that is perfectly proportional to our paper. The next thing we want to do is grid this. So you go to View, you come down to Show, and you go to Grid, and a grid will appear. The next thing we want to do is format that grid to what we want. So the grid that appears when you do this initially might look crazy, 100 bazillion little squares. just ignore that. Turn the grid on so we can actually see the grid. And then what we have to do is go to Preferences. And in Preferences, you'll see Guides, Grid, and Slices. So that'll allow us to now format the type of grid that we want. So you click on that, and that'll take you to this page. And down here in the Grid section, what I want you to do is the grid line should be every 25%. So that gives us quarters. All right. And then subdivisions, we really don't want any subdivisions, but you have to put a number in. So put in the number 1 and then hit OK. And then you'll get something which looks like this. All right. So this is our picture gridded. Okay. So now you can work from your computer screen or you can print it out. It's entirely up to you how you want to work on this. Then we come to our paper. And because it is 18 by 24, it's easy. Right? It's going to be 9 is the halfway point, whereas over here 12 is the halfway point. 6 is half of 12. There's your halfway point again. 4.5 is half of 9. So then you transfer your grid to your paper, knowing full well that your image here is perfectly proportional. Now what we do is we start to transfer our image, but we do that by focusing on the lines and the edges. Don't get stuck into all the details in the drawings, right? Just get, where does this big shape cut through these boxes? So here, for instance, you see here's the width of the box. Notice the hair cuts out about halfway through. So on your paper, that's where that hairline needs to be. Up here, it's not quite halfway through. It's more to the right. So you'll do that. You come over here, maybe here's the halfway point. It's a little bit more to the left. And this is, maybe a third of the way of this line. So follow these lines and where things cut through as your guides. All right. But do this in pencil and do it relatively light. And don't worry about the details like this. We just want to really get the big shapes. All right. Now, when you come to squares that are very complicated, so like this square is not too complicated, right? So it's just easy pretty much to sort of eyeball it. But like this square and this square and this square, these 3 squares have all the information in them. So what I would recommend is that you draw an X in each of these 3 squares. And what that does is it breaks down the square into 4 more pieces. And then do that on your photograph also. I'll let you figure that one out. I've never put an X on a photograph, a Photoshop image, but see if you can figure that out, and maybe you can share it online with the rest of us. But by having this X, you've subdivided each one of these squares into 4 more pieces. And then you can go even more by putting a line through the middle of the X's this way and a line through the middle of the X's this way. And then we get 8 pieces. And so the smaller the piece, the easier it is to determine, where does the top of the lip go? Where do the bottom of the nostrils go? Is the eyeball halfway between here and here? Well, no, the halfway point seems to be here, which is the end of the whites of the eye. And so the more precise and smaller subdivisions, the more accurate our drawing is going to be. So I'll let you, that'll be your call. And then once you've drawn your lines and you've got your major shapes without details, then we start to shade using vine charcoal. But before you do that, please remove the grid lines. We don't want these lines as part of the picture. So then come in and just softly, using the vine charcoal with your fingers, just gently develop it, and then use your charcoal pencils and compressed charcoal to come in and do the details, the really strong darks. Our job is to make our drawing look exactly like our picture. So the values have to be perfect. So work up to them slowly. Start with grays, and when you use your hand and fingers to rub it in, do it very, very gently. We're trying to capture this photographic look of the portrait. Okay, and good luck.